My name is Elisabetta Longhi. I teach German language and linguistics at the University of Parma. I'm going to talk about the use of Adobe Connect to enhance speaking awareness in second language acquisition. I carried out a tandem project together with my colleagues Chiara Angelini from the University of Mainz and Katharina Jakob from Munich. Katharina Jakob worked at the time at the University of Parma as an exchange professor. Our objective was to enhance fluency in speaking through synchronous dialogues with native speakers. In particular, we wanted to enhance turn-taking skills and argumentative abilities in various speaking contexts through metalinguistic reflection. To achieve these goals, in the academic year 2014-2015, we carried out this tandem project. We put together German students learning Italian at the University of Mainz and Italian students learning German at the University of Parma. They all had a language level corresponding to B2 of the European framework. Virtual classes were held in rooms made available by Adobe Connect. These shared lessons took place once a week for 6 weeks in both semesters. We tried to arouse language awareness as a prerequisite for the development of advanced communication skills. In the following, we will clarify how the communication medium Adobe Connect influenced the process of learning, compelling the students to pay attention to specific features of oral discourse which usually occur in a different form. So the question we are going to answer is to what extent and how did Adobe Connect video conferencing contribute to the participants' metalinguistic reflection? As a result of our teaching experience, we found out that the use of Adobe Connect highlighted the factors of communication according to Jakobson's model, as well as their interrelations. Messages, that is, speeches, were conveyed through video conferencing. When you interact physically, not virtually face to face, you don't think of the air which enables your words to reach your partner's ears. You just realize that there is a communication channel when you have some trouble with it. And we did have some trouble when something went wrong with the connection. Adobe Connect provides attendees with a chat window, or more if needed, that can be used in such cases, asking for help when you cannot communicate otherwise, for example because your microphone is not working. Writing short messages in this space has another advantage. During plenum discussions, you don't disturb the meeting if the problem you are trying to solve only regards you or your equipment. Nevertheless, your SOS reaches the technician. Besides its practical use, this feature of the software enhanced students' awareness of the importance and influence of the communication channel itself. Our students also realized that language can have a fatigue function too, like in the messages shown. Another way you become aware of the communication channel is by checking your equipment through the guided procedure known as Audio Setup Wizard, which you can find in the meeting menu. Before every meeting, students were called upon to test their microphone and earphone, regulate the volume, and ask for help if something was not working properly. They thus realized once more that there was not just air between them and their interlocutors, and they further perceived the difference between listening and speaking, as it could happen that their earphones functioned but the microphone didn't, or vice versa, as if they were temporarily deaf or mute or both, a situation that a non-disabled cannot experience in real life. Even when the connection functioned, attendees were not seen or heard if they forgot to activate their webcam or microphone, as connecting them, that means plugging in the device, was not enough. In such cases, the resulting limitation was not due to any malfunction, but simply to oversight. However, if this happened, people experienced being temporarily mute likewise, but never ceased to hear the other voices, so they could listen but not speak. This somewhat artificial division between the two abilities distinguished the passive and active use of language. Moreover, you could always identify the speaker thanks to the fact that a small microphone icon next to his or her name blinked every time someone was saying something. In this way, technique signaled once more who had the floor and who didn't. Everybody was a sender and a receiver at different times. Furthermore, the difference between listening and speaking was underlined by the general rule that everybody had to speak his or her second language in order to always train the weakest skill, that is, oral language production. Our decision had the side effect that the roles of the partners in the communication process were very well defined by the code spoken at that particular moment, as a change of role from addresser to addressee or vice versa corresponded to a change of code too, at least in the one-to-one interactions. As for the rest, this didn't apply completely to every phase of our lesson. For example, in plenum, sometimes two speakers of the same nationality took the floor, one immediately after the other. But to explain this better, let's now talk about the lesson structure before we come back to turn-taking. Every online meeting included three phases: monologue, plenum discussion, one-to-one or small group interaction. The lesson structure was so conceived as to train different types of speaking, and this variety of communicative situations raised the students' awareness that the way in which we speak strongly depends on extra-linguistic factors such as audience, purpose, and context. Students need to know what linguistic resources can be used for organizing and structuring stretches of speech to form coherent spoken texts that are appropriate for the setting and the participants. Adobe Connect helped them acquire this ability to switch from one language register to another by technically separating the different work phases through layout changes. During the initial monologues, consisting of a presentation done together by a German and an Italian student, or in turn by the teachers, almost the whole screen was occupied by the handout or by an image or video. But you could see the speaker on the left top of the screen, the next speakers, if any, just underneath, and the list of all attendees' names underneath. The person holding the floor had a preset time available, and everything was thoroughly planned, from the choice of arguments to their sequence, but the discourse should be spoken in a relaxed, seemingly spontaneous manner, like public speaking. During the plenum discussions, the argumentation didn't follow a pre-established pattern, and the internal organization of every speech was preceded by the evaluation of the external information, that is, the opinions expressed by the others. So every speech was in a way extemporary, a sort of reaction to the previous arguments. In short, the competence to take part in the argumentation thread was based on both cognitive and social skills. Formality and spontaneity were combined at the utmost level. Everyone was an addressee and an addresser at different times, and the active role of the latter was technologically highlighted by his or her face displayed in the middle of the screen, with the listeners' faces displayed in a much smaller space underneath, and all attendees' names on the left. The third phase, students continued the discussion in pairs or small groups, which were assigned a separate breakout room each. Every pair or group only saw its own members' faces. This created an easygoing atmosphere and more familiar modes of social interaction. It was like talking to friends about academic matters. Some small talk was allowed to break the ice, but then the topics and the corresponding vocabulary remained the same as during the plenum discussion. Turn-taking changed in the different phases of our lessons. However, the general rule was that listeners couldn't speak while someone else was talking. Actually, this is first of all common sense and politeness. Nevertheless, in real life, the public's whispering into one another's ear is not an exception and can be really disturbing. In virtual life, it's possible to prevent it technically, or at least to prevent it from disturbing the session. Not all of the attendees have the same status. In our case, except for the breakout rooms, students were just participants. Hosts and presenters conducted the meeting and established who had the right to speak by giving him or her the permission to do so. Students who wished to speak just had to indicate it by clicking on the raise hand button and waiting for their turn to speak. This button was very helpful. In a virtual room, people don't always see each other very well due to poor technical quality or simply because the attendees who are not speaking are displayed in too small a space to see clearly if they are raising their hands, whereas you would probably have less trouble if you were all physically in the same place. The raise hand button drew learners' attention and fostered metalinguistic reflection on the importance of turn-taking in oral language. Such importance is very frequently underestimated, even if this kind of pragmatic competence is often what makes the difference between a good and a proficient or native speaker of the target language. On one hand, the second part of our sessions reproduce the turn-taking patterns which are most common in traditional classes. That is, a type of language which differs from real life and where teachers have not only much more turns compared with the other participants, but also an overwhelming power of decision, as they always selected the next speaker. Technology made this more evident than ever, as it strengthened their power and conversational rights. On the other hand, the new setup of the third phase imitated spontaneous speech very effectively. That is, it truly reproduced in a virtual room the face-to-face interactions of real life, even more realistically than traditional in-presence classes. Like in authentic communication outside the classroom, students were free to choose the point for the change of roles between addresser and addressee. As for overlaps, it's hard to say how much they depended on cultural factors. Common experience shows that Italians tend to talk over another person more frequently than Germans, or at least they frequently don't perceive it as a violation of the non-written turn-taking rules of interaction, like most Latin peoples. In conclusion, our students experienced how difficult it is to take the turn at the right moment in authentic situations. Authenticity has always been the key success factor of tandem programs. Thank you for your attention.